All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Renaud back again with another video. This time we're going to talk about something that a lot of people these days are really struggling with, their weight. And when I say these days, I do truly mean nowadays. According to the World Health Organization, obesity has tripled worldwide from 1975 to 2016, at which point about 13% of the world's population were obese. From 2017 to 2018, the prevalence of obesity in the U.S. was 42.4%, according to the CDC. They also point out that the medical cost of obesity was $147 billion back in 2008. And that's just one estimate. Another actually put it at $190 billion as far back as 2005. Right now, in 2021, as demographic trends are unlikely to have done some kind of weird 180 in the last couple of years, that's likely even worse now. The health impacts of obesity that contribute to this gargantuan cost are myriad and severe, including, but not limited to, breast cancer, prostate cancer, endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer, esophageal cancer, renal cancer, pancreatic cancer, obviously, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, heart failure, arthritis, stroke, and more. Obesity itself is a very complex issue, and today we're not really here to analyze in depth the whys and the hows. To do that, we'd have to talk about some uncomfortable things like food insecurity in the world's richest country and racial disparities in obesity rates. We might do that at some point, but the title of this video is Weight Loss and Weight Gain. And today we're going to try and offer some foundational knowledge about how one's weight changes and what one could do to take control of their own weight. This is by no means going to be a detailed breakdown of obesity physiology and medical management, the likes of which a bariatrics doctor is used to, but rather an overview oriented towards the average individual that is both understandable and reasonably expansive. Now, before we jump into part one, I just want to put a disclaimer right up front. I am a doctor, but I'm probably not your doctor, unless I am, in which case, hit me up and we'll talk. But always consult with your doctor before making important health and medical decisions. I try to keep things broad in these videos to elaborate on concepts, but there may be some nuances to your particular situation that may not be accessible, that you may not pick up on exactly just by watching this video. This isn't medical advice, just a video for educational purposes. Now, at some point you've probably heard about the idea of calories in and calories out. Calories in refers to how much energy you consume through your diet. Calories out refers to how much energy you expend through activity and activity at rest, and through heat. And together, these factors in and out determine your energy balance. This concept of energy balance is at the same time simple and wildly complex. Let's take a moment to define and really go into depth on what we mean by calories in and calories out. Calories in is a bit simpler than calories out. When you eat food, after chewing and swallowing, your body digests and then absorbs that food, and ultimately a variable amount of it gets to a point where it can be metabolized for energy. There are some commonly used numbers for how much each gram of micronutrient gives you as far as energy. So 4 calories for carbohydrates, 4 for protein, 9 for fats, and for you regular drinkers out there, 7 for alcohol, although that's not technically a normal macronutrient. These numbers are population averages, and individual mileage is going to vary. These numbers can even be different with the same food meal to meal, depending on how well you chew something like nuts, for instance, that often have indigestible cell walls that require thorough chewing so that your gut can extract as much energy as possible. On top of this, our metabolisms are variably efficient at turning food into energy, which can change based on a variety of genetic, endocrine, immune, and environmental factors. If you have celiac disease and you aren't gluten-free, your absorption is going to be limited and the calories on the box are going to be higher than what you're actually getting in a lot of cases. If all your brush border enzymes are working perfectly and your pancreas and gut are all in order, you may get a more optimal absorption profile than some other people. as a lot of people have undiagnosed gut issues that are simply mild enough that they can ignore them. Calories out is a more complicated matter. When we say calories out, we can break up energy expenditure into a few things: basal metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, exercise energy expenditure, and non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Most of this, often something like 2/3 of calories out, is basal metabolic rate, or BMR. BMR can be affected by a variety of factors: current dry weight and muscle mass, in other words, you'll expend more energy as you get heavier; age, BMR tends to go down as you age; gender, men tend to have a higher BMR; and endocrine profile. For example, thyroid function has a large effect on BMR. Most of your basal metabolic rate actually comes from highly metabolically active organs like liver, brain, and heart, with muscles contributing more per pound than fat. On top of the known contributing factors, something like about 250 calories of BMR is unaccounted for in some individuals, which will become relevant when we talk about calculating calories and to put this information to use later in the video. The thermic effect of food has to do with how much energy it takes to do the work of using food as energy. Remember, digestion and absorption is an actively performed sequence. What exactly does that mean? It ends up meaning that protein requires more energy expenditure to digest and absorb than carbohydrates, and carbohydrates require more energy than fats. A diet that's majority fats produces the least thermic effect, and a majority protein diet has the most thermic effect. Exercise energy expenditure is pretty self-explanatory. It's how many calories you end up burning through directed exercise. This doesn't typically add up to a whole lot, even in people who work out pretty hard. The Beachbody Insanity products advertise up to 1,000 calories in a single workout. This is rarely, if ever, going to be the reality even with those programs. Don't get me wrong, I've done those workouts and they're hard. But burning that many calories through even hard exercise like that repeatedly is unlikely as your body adapts to the exercise. You might get that once in the very beginning if you're lucky, once or twice maybe. But even crazy programs like that might get you, in the higher, maybe 600-700 calories more realistically in terms of exercise energy expenditure, and maybe even less once you've gotten used to them. Most people who lift weights at the gym or go to spin class might be burning more like a few hundred calories that way, maybe 400 or 500 calories, provided they're not just going through the motions. Exercise is important for health, but tends to be a more minor contributor to overall calories out. Another contributor here is NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is a really interesting component of calories out. Basically, everything that isn't exercise, eating, or sleeping, like for instance fidgeting, walking, standing, doing yard work, is counted as NEAT. Have you noticed that sometimes when you're sitting around, you subconsciously bounce your foot up and down without even thinking about it? Or maybe you tap your fingers on the table. Maybe you tend to pace at times, perhaps while you're making a call. I, for one, do all of these compulsively. I wouldn't feel right taking a call and not walking around. I'm always fidgeting around when I'm in a chair. A lot of these are either subconscious or otherwise a part of everyday life, like how much you end up walking throughout the day. As you can imagine, people with jobs that involve physical labor have much higher NEATs than those with desk jobs. Another very interesting observation is that NEAT is automatically regulated by a mechanism we don't really understand at this point, alongside a person's weight. If a person significantly gains weight, their NEAT tends to go down, and vice versa when that same person loses weight. Part of the adaptation that happens to weight change is an automatic subconscious regulation of NEAT. And this can actually go all the way up to 2,000 calories, the equivalent of some smaller people's total BMR. If, in a perfect world, your calories in were equal to your calories out, you'd end up not gaining or losing any weight during that period when they were equal. Now, this is pretty much never going to happen exactly, but you'd be surprised at how effective the homeostasis mechanisms of a normal person whose weight typically remains stable actually are. In a medical school nutrition lecture, I remember being told that most people who slowly become overweight in the absence of acute stressors, people often gain something like the weight of a cornflake every day. If your calories in ends up being greater than your calories out, you gain weight. If your calories out is greater than your calories in, you lose weight. Now that we've established that basic idea, we can move on to